Hello, thank you everyone for joining. Really pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you today about a topic and an architectural approach that we hear a lot about from data leaders and other members of the Eckerson Group community, and really pleased to be joined by two industry leaders in the form of Matillion and Databricks. So our topic today is the rise of the data lakehouse, converged analytical workloads, and of course, generative AI. So my name is Kevin Petrie. I run the research division here at Eckerson Group. We're a boutique research and consulting firm focused on data and analytics. I've been doing a lot of research on cloud data platforms, including the Lakehouse approach, as well as generative AI, data management, data pipelines, and machine learning operations. I'm going to let Mark Balkenende and Dennis Dubois introduce themselves as well. Mark, why don't you go first?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Balkenende. I'm VP of Product Marketing here at Matillion. I've been in the data management space for over 20 plus years, doing both practitioner and as well as working at different data integration companies here today at Matillion. So excited to tell you guys more about Matillion and the fireside chat. So thank you.
Thank you. Dennis.
Hey, thank you both. I'm Dennis Dubois. I'm a lead solution architect here at Databricks. Been in Databricks for just about 5 years. Prior to that, I've been in the industry for quite some time. So I've had some stops at IBM and Hortonworks, a few of those, and a couple of customers as well. So happy to be part of this session today. I'm looking forward to the fire chat as well.
Excellent. Okay, so our format today is that I'm going to kick things off and talk about industry trends, really define the Lakehouse architectural approach, what the use cases are, business drivers, and some of the requirements that we think are most important to data leaders. I'll then hand over to Dennis, who's going to walk through the Databricks approach, and then Mark, who's going to talk about Matillion Data Productivity Cloud. At that point, we're going to have a fireside chat. It'll actually be a lakeside chat, if you will, to talk about what some of the common trends among adopters are in the industry and what we can learn from them. So it should be a great discussion. We encourage folks to chime in with Q&A and look forward to the fireside chat in particular being interactive in that regard. So the data lakehouse. What is the lakehouse? This is a term coined by none other than Databricks. And I think while some terminology varies, there's a fair amount of consensus about this term. The architectural approach is definitely common along a lot of commercial vendors now. And essentially, the data lakehouse seeks to combine the best of the data warehouse with the best of the data lake. If we look at some recent history, we had the data warehouse paradigm that emerged in the 1990s and has persisted as a way to organize structured tabular data, govern it, present it, and analyze it for business intelligence projects. We also have the data lake, which emerged in the 2010s, starting with Hadoop and then evolving towards more cloud-native object storage as repositories. And the data lake is a flexible way to store multi-structured data objects and support initially really focused on data science, AI, ML projects. And now they're coming together. And I think it makes a lot of sense what we're doing, what organizations are attracted to when they look at platforms such as Databricks Lakehouse is the ability to run SQL constructs, SQL queries that manipulate and retrieve data, structured data within the data warehouse format, and take that and put it on top of cloud-native object storage. Now, there's a lot of other elements that are being combined as well. You want the ability to transform data. You want the ability to search it, apply machine learning or other types of AI ML models to it, and to apply governance controls. So if you can effectively take the data warehouse, expand it to new types of multi-structured data objects, expand it to accommodate various types of data science projects, such as generative AI, which is a pretty powerful emerging way to deal in process and unstructured text and to generate text to support a lot of different use cases. The Lakehouse can be a viable platform for all these use cases. It's obviously easier said than done, which is part of why we're here to talk about patterns and practices for data pipelines. Ideally, organizations can use the Lakehouse to run workloads that start to bring pieces together, not just isolated BI reporting, but also AI/ML, machine learning models that might contribute to BI dashboards. Or you could start to embed some of the outputs from dashboards, from machine learning models into operational applications. So it's a world of convergence, and the more you can enrich and converge those workloads, the more enterprises can gain competitive advantage. Okay, so as I said, easier said than done. This convergence does require a fair amount of team collaboration. And so I've identified here 4 particular roles: data analyst, data scientist, data engineer, and then of course the business manager. What we see as primary points of collaboration where there are important handoffs taking place are that data engineers are going to help data scientists and get help from them to build data pipelines to support AI/ML projects. As part of that, for example, data engineers will work with data scientists or potentially machine learning engineers to vectorize text, put it into the Lakehouse in a vectorized format so that that can start to support language models for generative AI. Data analysts also need to help data scientists so that they can help with exploratory data analysis. And of course, data analysts and data scientists are trying to ultimately help business managers make and operationalize smarter decisions. So these data team members are relying on one another to deliver analytical results and, of course, business benefits to the top line or the bottom line. All right, so if we drill in a little bit more and talk about data management tasks, specifically related to data pipelines in this Lakehouse environment, we're talking about pipelines, workflows, essentially, that will ingest data, extract it in increments or potentially bulk loads from a variety of sources, relational databases, potentially a source data warehouse that might reside on premises, SaaS applications, and IoT sensors, a lot of other things that could feed that as well, social media platforms and so forth. So you want to ingest that and put it into the Lakehouse and start to transform it, prepare it for analytics and processing. The transformation can involve filtering, merging, formatting data for consumption. The data ops discipline is really a program comprising people and process and technology. If we look at the functionality, it's really about using CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery of updates to optimize data pipelines, test the functionality of the pipelines, and then monitor or observe the results. Orchestration is figuring out how these different pipelines can work together within and across Lakehouse environments to help ensure that those pipelines are interacting well with the applications and the analytical tools that consume their outputs. So we've done some research here at Eckerson Group, a fair amount of research on generative AI. And it's important to note that generative AI has this symbiotic relationship with data management. You, of course, have data management to deliver data to generative AI applications. I talked about vectorizing text, putting it into a vector format so that it can support language models. There's also the important use case, which is emerging here, is just that generative AI assistants help data engineers manage pipelines in the Lakehouse. So this poll is, I'm sure these numbers have grown since then because we did this earlier this year. Nearly half of data engineers already use generative AI tools such as ChatGPT, and now increasingly functions within data pipeline tools for data engineering. So 23% are in pilot, 20% are actively using it in production, and a lot more are considering it. And a lot of the common use cases are writing documentation, so trying to understand your data environment and document it so that you can present it and collaborate with other stakeholders in your environment, and learning new techniques and designing and building data pipeline code. So the challenges here are that you can have fragmented environments, you can have sort of mini silos within Lakehouses, different zones of different data in different stages of transformation. There's also dynamic and complex processes, often overly manual, that data engineers, data scientists, and ML engineers and so forth struggle to overcome as they figure out how to bring together multi-structured data objects to support those converged workflows that I talked about. And of course, data quality remains a primary concern that I think is probably not getting enough attention from practitioners right now, and compliance risks. There are compliance risks related to privacy, GDPR, CCPA here in the United States, and then of course, likely emerging AI legislation for example, with the European Union and its proposed AI Act. So the requirements for pipeline tools for data management to support this are ideally consolidating the number of tools you have. Research here at Eckerson Group shows that despite their best efforts, a lot of organizations expect to increase the number of tools they have this year. You try to consolidate because it can help simplify what you're doing. Efficiency and performance are critical, figuring out how you can consume fewer cloud compute cycles to optimize cost, and then of course meet your requirements for latency and throughput. Team productivity is critical. It's something that I think gets a fair amount of focus at an aggregate level, but it really means ensuring that different stakeholders are communicating well and automating as much as they can. And so some of these language model assistants can help with that. Open architecture is critical. This is an area that Databricks has invested a fair amount, as well as Matillion, to ensure that you can bring in elements from a pretty rich open source ecosystem, especially as it relates to Python coding, software development, and data science. And of course, governance. Organizations need data quality observability. They need data pipeline performance observability to ensure that they're delivering timely and accurate data that doesn't send analytical outputs in the wrong direction. This especially matters when you're looking at generative AI. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Dennis, and he's going to talk through the Databricks perspective on some of the topics here. Dennis, I'm going to drive the slides here. I'll hand over to you.
So yeah, let me start here by sharing with you that Databricks is the inventor and pioneer of the data lakehouse. So Gartner recognizes us in both the data management systems and the data science and machine learning platform quadrants. And we're also the creator of very successful open source data projects like Delta Lake, which is an Apache Spark, as well as Apache Spark, and MLflow. And we're continue to create and innovate in some of these open source projects as well. So you might have attended Data and AI Summit in this past June. So we have a numbers of different offerings. But let me share a little bit of a perspective on that open source adoption. Apache Spark is downloaded on average 45 million times a month. And that's data is as of May of 2022. Our Delta Lake open source project is about 7 million downloads per month, and MLflow average is about 10 million. So, and that's prior to the announcement of MLflow 2.5 at Data and AI in June. So we are a 6,000 plus global enterprise, and then we are increasing our headcounts by the day. We've just reached and exceeded $1.5 billion in revenue. That was per our latest announcements and part of the latest round of funding that we just happened a few weeks ago. And we have now raised over $3 billion of investment. So we do continue to rapidly innovate, and we've had a numbers of depth and breadth functionality to the Lakehouse platform. At a glance, we announced at Data and AI Summit this past June, Lakehouse Federation Delta 3.0 with our project Uniform, which provides compatibility between many of the different file systems out there that are prominently used in large-scale enterprise, like Apache Hudi, Apache Iceberg, and Delta Lake for that matter. So we've uniformed in those data file format. And liquid clustering, which is another ability for us to really forward on the behalf of the customer to cluster data, knowing about the data and providing a clustering capability. And all of these are in public preview, which means they're ready for prime time and you can run in production with production workloads, and they're supported. So many other features like the Hive Metastore interface, and we've also announced Lakehouse IQ. We were just talking about generative AI. So this is our solution for providing an NLP solution within the product itself, and will be public preview in Q4. Finally, we continue to evaluate market acquisition and strengthen the Lakehouse platform. You probably saw Mosaic ML was a recent acquisition that provides us the ability to address large language models and strategic and training customer models. So that's a little bit about us. And Kevin, if you can go to the next slide. So let me talk about the actual Lakehouse approach and concepts. It really starts with being the only company that brings all of the ingredients together in one unified platform. We're definitely a platform that is supported on all major clouds and provided a common experience whether you are on any of these cloud providers. So it's exactly the same platform across. Delta Lake provides that best price performance, Lakehouse Foundation. And you can try it yourself as well as you can run your own TPCDS benchmark that's available in a public repo. So we publicly made that available for anyone who actually, there's plenty of communication on social media about, platform performance. So all that's being made available. So we are 100% open. And so that, ensures that you always have access and always in control of your data. Furthermore, we just announced that uniform project, as I mentioned, Data and AI, which is in public preview right now. So, have a look at it. So if you're using Iceberg today or Hootie, there's no lock-in. You can actually use uniform to query across all the data file formats. So our Unity catalog, as you move on to the next layer, Unity catalog is a purpose-built catalog for the Lakehouse. It really just simplifies all the security and the governance across all your data, structured and unstructured, as well as all of the other assets that you might actually have as part of the marketplace. And finally, we have a multi-persona experience that for either SQL or Python-based users. We offer many different avenues and how to operate on your data and build and orchestrate workflows and manage pipelines and many different ways that which is basically multiple different flexibilities of how to handle from delta live tables to establish workflows and orchestrate workflows. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, this is at a glance how we position the Databricks Lakehouse versus some of the enterprise data clouds and native data lake in the industry. So I will not bore you by reading all these different, this entire grid, but it gives you at a glance a perspective of where Databricks provides capability, where the enterprise data clouds and native data lakes fall short. Some of them have some of these capabilities, but they're either tagged on or complementary with partner solutions. Those are inherently built in Databricks and natively available in the Lakehouse. So let's move on to the next one, please. So finally, today we're talking about integrations, and we have our friends here at Matillion with us, and Mark's going to tell us a little bit more about the data productivity cloud. But today, Matillion offers two distinct products that are fully validated and integrated with Databricks. One is the Matillion Data Loader, which is a SaaS solution, which will evolve into this data productivity cloud that Mark is best positioned to talk about. But it's really a point-and-click data pipeline solution, really easy to ingest data into the Lakehouse. And then as you start curating your data processes, you can now then use your Databricks SQL warehouse, serverless warehouse, and then connect to any reporting tools of your choice at that point and provide us as well the end-to-end machine learning experience and start producing in some insights. They also offer Matillion ETL, which is a GUI-based product that helps us apply transformation on the warehouse itself. Now, all of this is all governed and powered by our Unity catalog, our Databricks SQL warehouse, and all of the features that I also just mentioned in terms of the feature set that continues to evolve really rapidly as we are innovating in that field.
All right, Dennis, thank you very much. Mark, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dennis. Thanks, Kevin. So let's get started. And first off, let's define data productivity. So Matillion is really started talking a lot more about how we help everybody be more productive. But what does that mean? So we measure data productivity by the ability of the data teams to deliver quality data on time and reliably. So if we can make teams more efficient and productive, then we increase their output and capacity. And this is the key really to companies' ability to unlock that full data potential of their data. So Matillion really is, so we like to say that Matillion is the productivity platform for the data teams. And what does that mean exactly? We want to meet all of our users of any technical level and get them to be more productive as fast as possible and in the most collaborative way possible by empowering the entire data team, everybody from data scientists, data engineers, data analysts, high code and low code alike, to be able to move, transform, and orchestrate the data pipelines faster to get that value quicker. Next slide. So Dennis talked a little bit about how we fit into the Databricks ecosystem, and if you look at the architecture here, he described a couple different products and components, but really the unified platform, and Kevin mentioned about consolidating tools and things like that. So in a lot of the cloud environments, there's a lot of different tools that do individual pieces that will help you ingest your data. There's tools that help you transform it, and then there's tools that orchestrate it. Matillion feels that in order to make you more productive, a unified platform is needed for all the data teams to do all pieces of those things, and we integrate very nicely into all of the key pieces, parts of Databricks. So as Dennis described, we provide the ability to ingest data through a very easy to use SaaS as well as hybrid model through our loader capabilities that give you both batch and CDC into Databricks and into the Delta Lake environment. And it integrates nicely and completely with all of the Unity catalog, so giving you that security, the governance, everything that Dennis talked about. And then today we have the transformation orchestration sits in a product that Dennis mentioned, the Matillion ETL. This is a self-managed tool, but it is quickly, within the next few weeks actually, will be a full SaaS version of that coming out in what's called that designer. In the designer is that drag and drop, easy to use, low code, but also allows you and gives you ability to manage your high code capabilities like Python and other tools out there. And we can orchestrate things like your notebooks and other ML and AI type capabilities. All this sits on top of what's called the Matillion Hub that gives you that single pane of glass of your pipeline observability, of your usage. Everything that's going on within your pipelines can be seen through the hub. And then the pipeline OS is really quite unique to other data integration platforms, where this can be a fully SaaS environment, full SaaS managed pipeline OS, or a hybrid, where you can take what runs the actual pipelines themselves and deploy that out into a containerized environment of your choice, or you can have Matillion run it. And what really is unique about this pipeline OS is they are stateless agents that run on a container service, and the pipeline itself is broken down into tasks. And if those tasks can be run in parallel, we'll deploy as many agents as needed, or as many containers needed, in order to achieve that task and that pipeline as fast as possible. So the things are parallelized within the pipeline automatically, unless of course you tell it that these are sequential, and it just gives you that scalability and the flexibility that you expect in the cloud, and it is quite unique and runs extremely fast. So next slide. So again, what we do with Matillion is around that move, transform, and orchestrate. Those are the three pillars that we really focus on helping data teams be much more productive with. And so within the move, it's all about making it simpler, easier, and faster, and making sure that as sources and source APIs and payloads change, that your pipelines don't break, that the need to custom code every integration really is what slows down a lot of data engineers and takes time to get data ingested into the data lake and into the Lakehouse and then transformed. The cost of end-to-end pipeline creation needs to be reduced, and just replicating data does not equal value, right? So just getting your data into Databricks isn't where the value is. It's using that data for whatever the workload is, whether it is for BI, whether it is for AI or ML, you name it. It's getting the data there, but then it's being able to transform it. And then Matillion helps bridge that gap, that skill gap, for people that are not necessarily high coders or data scientists that understand the Scalas or the even Pythons of the world. Some of us, me included, I never got onto Scala. I could never get my head wrapped around that, but I think I stopped at Python. That was where my skill gap lands. or just SQL. And that's where a lot of people, there's millions more people that know SQL than Python and other things. And Matillion will help you do that transformation. So it'll help you whether you are a Python developer, SQL developer, or not. We give you the ability to build those transformations in any form that you need or want, but then give you a much faster and easier way to maintain those, removing that bottleneck. And it doesn't mean that if you have 200 more sources that you need to add into Databricks, you don't need to hire 20 more data engineers to get that done. Matillion can help you do that quickly and easily and maintain it with the most simplistic way possible. And then orchestrating all these end-to-end pipelines within one platform as well. So Matillion's orchestration layer is not only for Matillion, as I mentioned, it gives you the ability to orchestrate things from Python to Delta Live tables on Databricks, notebooks in Databricks, you name it. It has that flexibility to have one single orchestration layer and then be able to see everything, the pipeline orchestration, the pipeline observability from end to end in a single place on that Matillion hub that we talked about. So it's all about automating these capabilities. I think that was my last slide, Kevin, maybe?
Thank you, Mark.
Beautiful, right on time.
All right, so here we are for our fireside lakeside chat. And this is a roundtable. Dennis has been great about responding to some of the questions that have come in through the chat. And maybe there's a question for Julie. I assume that Dennis's answers have showed up for everyone to consume. And if not, I'd be happy to walk through those verbally here. But in the meantime, why don't we kick off what we're seeing in the field? And so, Dennis, I'll put this to you first. What strategic initiatives do you see driving the adoption of the data lakehouse? And then we'll have Mark go, and I'll add some perspective as well.
Obviously, warehouses as use cases and data lake use cases, and the ability for us to have a single platform being able to orchestrate both types of workload. Now, that's the foundation, and obviously providing a format like Delta Lake, which provides the ability to deliver on that performance criteria that most businesses are needing today. Also, we didn't really touch on streaming because we talked about ingest right now, but the platform, the Lakehouse platform supports many different ways to ingest that data, and streaming is the new batch, right? So I think this is one of the major initiatives that we see our customer adopting. Whether you trigger once, which is basically a batch workload, or you continuously ingest data as the data arrives, and having the ability to curate that process using a medallion process, so you can actually apply CDC processes to that as well along the way. So we provide all these functionality, and the fact that we also integrate with great partners like Matillion as well, whereby if a customer has made an investment in a certain set of technology and built some skills around it, I think we always look at like that as a strategic initiative for us to ensure that we bring the right partner to bear with the customer's use cases.
Mark, how about you? What projects or strategic initiatives are triggering adoption of the Lakehouse and the Lakehouse as a target of the Matillion pipeline?
Yeah, so our customer base is a little bit different than Databricks, of course, and Databricks is the founder and promoter of the Lakehouse. So I think we're really seeing that true adoption of the Lakehouse finally, and I say finally because I think it just makes the most sense really to have all the data replicated into one place and then used for the different workloads, right? And that's exactly what the Lakehouse provides, that ability to store the data in the data lake or in that raw form, and then you can build your warehouse on your Delta Lake. You can build your AI, data science, and machine learning all in one single place. And so we're really seeing our customer base starting to adopt that exact mentality, seeing the value of not having to replicate data across different cloud platforms and cloud environments, just because you need it for different workloads. So we're really starting to see that, and it helps with the governance again, because you're not duplicating data across these different cloud platforms as well. So yeah, and then streaming is the new batch, as Dennis said. It really seems to be coming up more and more with our customer base, with our CDC capabilities. So yeah, I think I'm really happy to see that the Lakehouse is truly getting adopted across all sizes of companies, from large enterprises to even startups and SMBs. So
Yeah, I think that's great perspective. What we see at Emerson Group is a continued adoption of cloud modernization, cloud migration projects, data modernization projects, where organizations are looking for additional data sets and workloads that they can move to the cloud. And they're also taking a cloud first approach, where new projects, new ventures, new experiments, they want to spin up on the cloud as opposed to on premises. So that shift continues to feed adoption of Databricks. Databricks has sort of a home field advantage given its heritage in Spark and Scala with data science projects. But there is increasingly recognition that Databricks is supporting, and the Lakehouse is supporting, those business intelligence workloads and providing some pretty robust data warehouse support for data warehouse use cases. So that's what we've seen here. I do want to there are a couple questions that came in, and we might cut to that quickly. Dennis has been answering a couple of them, but related to generative AI and on the Lakehouse and the Databricks Lakehouse support for generative AI use cases. Dennis, there was a question about support for vector databases sort of within the Lakehouse environment, and then other type of generative AI features, presumably as assistance within the Databricks environment. Perhaps you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, vector database is a type of approach that we have used internally at Databricks for quite some time, actually, already, with our, original ML capabilities that the platform was built upon. If you look at Databricks in 2013, I mean, our bet was on AI and ML. I mean, we kind of came to the conclusion that we needed to have a better curation process to activate insights via ML and AI. And then that led us to generative AI. You guys probably heard about Dolly at one point when ChatGPT came out. So we demonstrated that you could actually build your own for something around $30 to $50 using our platform. So we always want to demonstrate that generative AI as a general concept is, I mean, a lot of people are using it, but when you apply this internally to your own data, into your own processes, that's where the value is for most of our customers. And the acquisition of Mosaic ML is another avenue for us to really double down, on LLMs. And we are also internally using generative AI in all aspects of our platform and our products everywhere. I mean, on the Databricks platform. And the Lakehouse IQ that was announced at Data and AI Summit as well is another NLP capability that's going to be allowing our customers to really quickly innovate on their own, and then start building their own generative AI capability within using their own data as well. And we see that path forward because we believe that your data is your biggest asset. And you want to use it internally and keep it internally and leverage that competitively as well, but also providing you the ability to go and build these generative AI capability within our Lakehouse platform. So there's a big push for us, and you'll see more and more of these features being rolled out in our product as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I agree completely that the next wave is really applying language models to enterprises' own domain-specific data, because that greatly reduces the risk of hallucinations. If you can have confidence in your own governed, curated inputs, you can have a lot more confidence in the outputs of language models. And so the vectorized database question, I think, there's an emerging pattern we see for what we call small language models. Applying it to your own domain-specific data, and retrieval augmented generation is a method that it sounds like Databricks can support, where you've got text within an enterprise, you vectorize it, you put it in a vector database, and then you query it so that a user prompt actually ends up querying the customer's own data, the company's own data. And that helps provide a pretty domain-specific higher accuracy response. So that emerging retrieval augmented generation pipeline and the RAG approach is something that we see gaining a lot more traction. Mark, I don't know if you have thoughts on all this too from a Matillion perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And so everything you guys have both said is so critical. And it's about building those pipelines. And that's where Matillion will be announcing some more capabilities coming out in November, early November timeframe. We'll start introducing about how we're going to support our users to build those pipelines and get your data into the model that you choose, right? But there's a lot of work that has to be done from getting the data into the vector database and training the models and then tuning those models to actually provide the meaningful outputs to the enterprise user themselves. But it's definitely 100% on what I think you and Dennis both said. There's more value in using your own data than just using that public domain data, as well as having the models that sit inside of your domain inside of your governed areas, so that that the data is not going outside your world as well, because there's all types of, I think you mentioned, Kevin, at the beginning around HIPAA and GDPR and all the other privacy things. That's a real concern for our customers as well. So how do you build those pipelines with your data and keep them secure inside of your firewalls, inside of your networks as well? So that's what Matillion's really focusing on the next quarter or so, is providing some previews into the ways to make it easier and more productive to load those and tune those models that Dennis is talking about as well. So
very good. So yeah, as I said, a couple of questions coming in on the generative AI front, so we skipped ahead to that. But why don't we look at overall lessons and best practices that we can learn from early adopters or recent adopters of the data lakehouse and converged projects and workloads on that. Dennis, do you want to go first? Best practices.
Sure,
what can
thanks.
we learn from folks who are who've been on the lakehouse for a while?
Well, best practices in the sense that once you adopt the lakehouse, you realize how simple, how to simplify all your processes. If you look at the landscape today, if you're not using a lakehouse approach, you have a bespoke set of processes and solutions, and it's really a mesh of components. And it's really, really, really hard to not only administer and maintain, but to innovate on what you need to do from an insights perspective for your business. And the governance is almost impossible. I had a slide earlier today that demonstrated the governance across enterprise data warehouse, data lakehouses, and the lakehouse. We govern via Unity catalog all of these components, the data assets, the time to live of that data, and the transformation it's going through. You can't really do this today in the current set of technologies. If you look with enterprise data warehouse, because they have their own set of governance, the data lake has their own set of governance, but the lakehouse provides that single pane of glass, providing you all these capabilities. And we've seen a lot of customers adopting that approach and reducing drastically their maintenance cycles and being able to innovate more rapidly. Knowing and understanding that who has access to this data. And Mark touched a little bit on external governance, but governance starts internally as well. I mean, to make sure that the right folks have access to the right data attributes and how their data is being transformed over time. So we know that most companies' data leaks comes from the inside. I mean, so if you govern that data very well, you'll have a better outcome. So the best practice is real simple, like standardize, simplify, put on one single platform that can do it all, and leverage the capabilities which are necessary to minimize the data movement across all these entities. And Delta sharing for us is another component that we haven't really touched on, but it allows you to provide a consumer producer model where let's not move the data. Let's just access the data where it's at, including Lakehouse Federation. So all of these best practices together. So try to minimize the data movement, standardize, centralize, and provide the right governance capabilities over that data asset. Has been, demonstrated many of our customers, driving value more rapidly.
Great stuff. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on best practices, learning from the early adopters?
Man, it's hard to add on top of that. Thanks, Dennis. But I think I'll just double down on a couple of things for sure. So They're from our perspective, the early adopters too is I don't think you can say enough about the governance, and it starts with as the data is ingested into the Lakehouse itself, right? So, and that's starting with the Unity catalog. So as data is loaded in, Dennis mentioned the medallion architecture, which is a great architecture type best practice as well. So having that raw zone, that staging zone, and then go to all the way up to the gold zone tables and data that's being used in whatever the practice is, whatever workload that is, if it's BI, ML, AI, doesn't matter, as long as it's being governed and people know where the data came from and how it's being used. So, everywhere starting at that replication, getting the data into that raw zone, but then being able to use it throughout the different workloads as well, and governing that from the very beginning is super important. So, I think just reiterate what Dennis has said in there. So definitely.
That's good. And so we've got an explicit data governance question here. I might add, so data governance is always tricky. It's been a thorn in the side of enterprises for 30 years and still is. There aren't many companies that would say, hey, we figured out data governance, we're all set, because they don't want to tempt the fates. And it's also hard. And one of the biggest reasons it's hard is it's not just technology, it's also people and process. So creating consistent policies that can be consistent, but also flexible to empower all these democratized users and all these new use cases, but still ensure that data is only consumed in a permissible way is challenging. And so on the consulting side at Eckerson Group, we do find a fair amount of uncertainty and desire for guidance about how to handle the people and process sides of the equation when it comes to governance. I think we're also going to see a pretty interesting period where there's going to be renewed focus on data governance, and it'll be driven by accelerated adoption of AI, especially with generative AI, which feeds on unstructured text. Unstructured text is an aspect of organizations' data environments that is less governed than others historically. And so now to make sure that you have your smart bots with generative AI and language model platforms make sure they're saying responsible things, you really need to curate and govern the data that goes into that. So I think there'll be a renewed focus both on the technology side and the people and process side on how you handle those text inputs for data governed environments. I don't know if either of you have thoughts on special considerations when it comes to people and process to govern text, but we'd love to hear that.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in enterprises and spent a lot of time with the governance, and I think you're correct. I don't know that any of the past organizations I ever worked in will ever say we've got governance nailed. It is a challenging aspect of it, but I think what's come a lot farther and is going to be critical, like you said, for generative AI, is that governance, and that people have to adopt it, and people are going to be asked, I think, more readily, where did that data come from, and how do we know this data is good, that's feeding these models, that's giving us these answers, and are the answers accurate from every model, large language models and BI, it doesn't matter. This most simplistic reports, people still ask, do I trust this data? And when it comes to, more text type data, that's one of the things that Matillion's getting more into, and AI is going to help us get into that, as well as data quality, be able to give us those capabilities so much faster and easier than it could have ever before. But again, it's where'd that text data come from, and how did it get broken down into the format that then's being used, and how can we trust it? I think it'll be the long age question. And as long as we have platforms like the Data Unity Catalog, is like some of our other partners in the governance space, and we adopt those early on in the journey, it's going to help you all the better. And that's why things like Unity Catalog, it's automatic. It's really automatically there from the get-go with Matillion and Databricks. As we load data in, it is feeding the Unity Catalog. It tags the data. It does the things that the Unity Catalog helps you with. So that's even better, because sometimes if you don't have to think about it and it's just there, it's even better. But you still need the people in the process to adopt it and work with it. So.
Yeah, Dennis, other perspectives.
Yeah, no, I think, people in process is always inherent to the organization. Those are, difficult. Everybody's unique in that sense. There's some aspects you can generalize across different customer base. But the fact that Unity Catalog provides data lineage and data transformation from the inception of that data to basically how it's being consumed and who has access to that data. So that provides that data governance on the access of that data as being transformed. I mean, obviously that's a start, but generative AI, along with some other partners as well that we work with, I think it's a complementary solution, right? So Unity Catalog provides that foundational capability, lineage, security, access of your data. But generative AI is probably going to give us that next leg, I think, was going to allow us to marry the process to the functionality that the product provides. Because a product is a product, and then there's so much functionality you can do. Now, from a process perspective and from a people perspective, I mean, all that can change dramatically from one persona to the next, or based on the type of access that you have. So generative AI, in my sense, is going to provide us the ability to do auditing, instant verification, as people are changing policies or applying new policies to the data attribute, understanding what that data was transformed from which angle and from which process. And generative AI internally is going to allow you to do that instant auditing capability, which has always been kind of a post-process. And that's why the challenge is, I think, in most enterprises, you set up these policies, you set up the process, you have a function, you have a tool that provides you, that allows you to complement this. But the auditing aspect of this is done, later on in the timeline. And by then, you might easily have, a leak, or, somebody is, accessing data that they should not. And I think generative AI is going to allow us to be more responsive and address some of these gaps or complement some of these processes that, customers are going to be putting forward. So.
And I think that there'll be a lot of scenarios in which you have generative AI alongside other more traditional analytical workflows. So you could have a user question in a customer service scenario that queries a semantic query, does a semantic search of a vector database to respond, and then also queries a SQL database to get the customer records. So there'll be a lot of cases where these things need to come together. And the structured data can help ensure that the the text response is more accurate. So interesting stuff here. So we do have an additional 2 questions here, and I want to make sure we get to them before the time we get to the top of the hour. Ala Majum is asking, do the platforms incorporate data fabric capabilities that leverage things such as active metadata, knowledge graphs, semantics, and ML to augment data integration, design, and delivery? So, Mark, why don't we have you go first?
I feel like they just read the Gartner DI Magic Quadrant as well. So, because it's almost exact words from there. So Matillion absolutely does support in several of these things, but Matillion is not a full data fabric by any means. And we never pretend to be. There's things like the knowledge graph that we don't support today. So you would have to work in different environments to support that. But we do provide a lot of the active metadata as you're building your pipelines, the semantics layers, and starting to introduce more ML to that augmented data integration layer as well, and the design capabilities. So again, those are things that we'll be introducing around the November timeframe at our Data Unlocked event. As well as in January, giving people the ability to go play with those capabilities, very much so. So at the very short, very quick answer for you, and we could go on about the data fabric for quite some time, is there are a lot of different capabilities around the ML or the data ops and orchestration layers and ingestion data management, data transformations that we fulfill in that data fabric, the way it's defined by people like Gartner. And then there's things that we don't, that you would partner with other groups or other vendors and partners to help us fulfill that different set of capabilities. So
very good. Dennis, data fabric, what are your thoughts from a Databricks perspective?
That's more of an Azure terminology, if you ask me. But
It's a Gartner one that
I
Azure adopted.
I just had to have a little punch there. So no, I mean obviously Databricks. Well, I mean you've heard about our Lakehouse IQ, but obviously you see it with metadata support. We do also provide knowledge graph, and let me put a link, a URL in here as well on the answer. So we do provide all of those capabilities within the Lakehouse today. And all of these capabilities are ever evolving as well as we move forward. But Lakehouse IQ, Federation, all of those two major capabilities are actually part of it. And we've already supported AI and ML. And you see with metadata and governance and data access. And we also have a knowledge graph capability within the product itself. So as a Fabric, if you were to use a Fabric terminology from more of a generic perspective, yes, we do. We do have all of that on the Lakehouse today.
Very good. Okay, final one. Question for Dennis. Dan Siokin wants to know, do you support both word vectors and word embeddings? I'm assuming yes, but we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Actually, this is an area where I know that we support word vectors, and let me do a quick search here on the word embedding. I'm pretty sure that we do, but I would not want to give you the wrong answer.
You could
I believe we do.
ask a quick chat bot, do a query of your language model within Databricks.
It is, yeah, exactly. Yes, I can do that, but we do support word vectors and word embedding.
Very good. So really that whole pipeline from text to token to vector to embedding to vector database to query response to a language model. You'll support that pipeline.
Yes, sir.
Very cool.
The short answer is yes.
About that right now. So good stuff. I think we're done here. We're close on time, and we've had some lively discussion from the audience. Really appreciate that. You'll see that Dennis also provided some answers here in the Q&A. But I want to thank Dennis and Mark for a great discussion. I know I learned a lot and hope other folks in the audience did as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.